The courtroom cameras captured a moment that would change lives forever. Karen Williams stood at the defendant's table with the kind of confidence that only comes from years of getting exactly what you want through intimidation and money. Her designer blazer was perfectly pressed, her hair freshly styled, and her expensive leather briefcase bulged with what she believed was an airtight case. Across from her sat 16-year-old Danny Martinez, wearing his only dress shirt that was slightly too small, his hands trembling as he clutched a thin folder containing the few documents his family could afford to print at the library. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. This wasn't just a small claims case about a damaged car. This was about power, privilege, and what happens when someone with everything decides to destroy someone with nothing. What Karen didn't know, as she smirked confidently at the teenager who dared to defend himself, was that Judge Judy had already spotted 23 lies in her written testimony in a matter of minutes. This entitled woman's entire web of deception would unravel in the most spectacular way ever captured on television. Karen Williams had a reputation in her upscale suburban neighborhood, and it wasn't a good one. For the past 3 years, she had made 17 official complaints to the Homeowners Association, and every single one targeted teenagers' kids skateboarding too loudly, teens playing basketball after her self-imposed quiet hours, young people walking through her street instead of taking the longer route around the block. She had become the neighborhood's most feared resident. The kind of person who would call the police on a lemonade stand and genuinely believe she was protecting property values. Her latest target was Danny Martinez, a 16-year-old honor student who worked part-time at the local grocery store to help his single mother pay bills after his father's death 2 years earlier. Danny had made one critical mistake in Karen's eyes. He had politely told her that he couldn't leave his register to personally carry her groceries to her car because there was a long line of customers waiting. That simple act of doing his job correctly had marked him for destruction. The accusation Karen leveled against Danny was devastating in its cruelty. She claimed that on October 15th, Danny had deliberately keyed her brand-new $85,000 Tesla Model S in the grocery store parking lot, leaving deep scratches that required expensive repairs. She was suing him for $8,500, the exact amount of Danny's college savings account that his late father had started for him. If Karen won this case, she wouldn't just take Danny's money. She would destroy his future. The grocery store had already suspended him pending the case outcome. His college applications were on hold because he couldn't explain an ongoing lawsuit. His mother had taken on extra shifts at the hospital where she worked as a nurse, terrified they would lose everything. The stakes couldn't have been higher for a working-class family already struggling to survive. But Karen had resources that Danny couldn't dream of matching. She had hired a lawyer who specialized in small claims cases, spending $3,000 on legal preparation alone. She had professional photographs of the damage, expert repair estimates from the Tesla dealership, and a thick binder full of documentation that looked impressive to anyone who didn't examine it closely. She had rehearsed her testimony, practiced her expressions of righteous indignation, and prepared herself to perform the role of victimized car owner. Karen had even gone shopping specifically for her court appearance, choosing an outfit that projected respectable affluence without seeming ostentatious. Every detail had been calculated to win, to crush the teenager who had dared to inconvenience her, and to send a message to every young person in her neighborhood that crossing Karen Williams came with devastating consequences. Danny, by contrast, had nothing but the truth. He sat in the plaintiff's chair wearing his father's old tie, brought from home in a plastic grocery bag because his family couldn't afford dry cleaning. His hands shook, not from guilt, but from pure terror. This was his first time in any courtroom, his first time facing legal action, his first time being accused of something he absolutely did not do. He had tried to get a lawyer, but consultation fees alone were beyond his family's budget. He had printed out information about tenant rights and small claims procedures from the library computer, studying late into the night after his homework and work shifts. His mother had wanted to take time off to be there with him, but they couldn't afford to lose her hourly wages. So Danny faced his accuser alone, armed with nothing but honesty and the desperate hope that the truth would somehow be enough. Before we watch Judge Judy dismantle Karen's lies and restore your faith in justice, you need to hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens in this case is the most satisfying courtroom takedown you will ever see. And drop a comment telling me, have you ever been falsely accused of something? How did you prove your innocence? Let's get into this incredible story of how one entitled woman thought she could destroy a teenager's life and instead destroyed her own reputation on national television. Judge Judy had already done something Karen never expected. She had investigated. While Karen was rehearsing her performance and Danny was losing sleep from anxiety, Judge Judy had spent hours reviewing evidence, checking timelines, and making phone calls that would expose every lie Karen had constructed. The trap was set. Karen just didn't know she was walking into it. Judge Judy's voice cut through the courtroom with her signature, no-nonsense tone. Mrs. Williams, tell me exactly what happened on October 15th. Karen stood up with theatrical flair, smoothing her designer blazer as if preparing for an award-winning performance. She cleared her throat and began speaking with a kind of manufactured emotion that sounded rehearsed rather than sincere. Your Honor, on that terrible afternoon, I had just finished my weekly shopping at Riverside Grocery. I had parked my Tesla, my pride and joy, in a spot far from the entrance specifically to avoid door dings and careless shoppers. When I came out with my groceries, I immediately noticed deep, deliberate scratches running along the entire passenger side of my vehicle. My heart absolutely sank. That car was only 3 weeks old. The payment book still smelled new. And there, standing just 20 feet away, was that boy. She pointed dramatically at Danny, who visibly flinched at the accusation. He was wearing his store uniform, and he had this smirk on his face. This knowing look that told me everything I needed to know. He had done this deliberately because I had complained to his manager the week before about his poor customer service attitude. Karen's lawyer, a thin man in an expensive suit with an uneasy expression, handed her a stack of photographs. She displayed them to the court with the confidence of someone convinced their evidence was flawless. As you can see, Your Honor, these scratches are extensive. They run from the rear passenger door all the way to the front fender. This wasn't accidental. This was vandalism, pure and simple. The Tesla dealership estimated repairs at $8,500, and I have their official estimate right here. She waved the papers in the air as if they were proof of a major crime. Judge Judy took the documents without expression, her eyes scanning them with the practiced efficiency of someone who weighed thousands of questionable claims. Mrs. Williams, you said this happened on October 15th. Yes, absolutely, Karen responded quickly. October 15th at approximately 3 in the afternoon. I remember it clearly because I had just left my Pilates class and needed to pick up items for a dinner party I was hosting that evening. The specificity seemed to strengthen her argument. But seasoned Judge Judy viewers noticed something. The judge's eyebrow had lifted slightly, a subtle sign that something didn't align. Judge Judy leaned forward with a deceptively gentle tone. And you're certain about the date? October 15th. Karen hesitated for just a fraction of a second, a pause so brief most people didn't catch it. Yes, well, actually, let me check my calendar. She fumbled with her phone, scrolling with suddenly less confident fingers. Yes, October 15th. Definitely. I may have initially said the 14th in my paperwork, but I meant the 15th. It was definitely the 15th. Judge Judy made a note. her pen moving across the page with deliberate slowness. "And you said Danny was wearing his store uniform when you saw him?" Karen nodded quickly, believing she was back on firm ground. "Yes, absolutely. He was wearing that awful green polo shirt with the store logo, green cargo pants, the standard uniform. Very distinctive. I couldn't possibly be mistaken about what I saw." Judge Judy's expression didn't change, but anyone familiar with her courtroom would have recognized the moment Karen made a critical mistake. The judge flipped through papers in front of her papers Karen hadn't seen and didn't know existed. "Tell me more about this poor customer service incident that motivated this alleged revenge," Judge Judy said, her tone almost casual. Karen launched into a story she had clearly practiced. "Oh, it was absolutely outrageous, Your Honor. I had asked him, very politely, if he could help me carry my groceries to my car. I had several heavy bags, and at my age, carrying them across that massive parking lot is quite difficult. But he looked at me with such contempt and said he was too busy to help customers with their bags. Can you imagine? Too busy to provide basic customer service. I reported him to the manager immediately. A decent young person would have been apologetic and helpful. Instead, he was rude and dismissive. So when I saw my car damaged and saw him standing there with that smirk, I knew immediately what had happened." She paused for dramatic effect. "He wanted revenge for my complaint. These entitled young people today think they can do whatever they want without consequences." The audience murmured, but the sound was skeptical, not supportive. Judge Judy let the silence stretch before asking her next question. "And were there any witnesses to this vandalism? Any other shoppers or employees who saw Danny near your vehicle?" Karen shook her head with what she likely thought was convincing regret. "Unfortunately, no. I had parked quite far from the entrance for safety reasons, so that section of the lot was relatively empty. It was just my word and the evidence of the damage itself. But, Your Honor, the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. He had a motive. He had an opportunity. And I saw him standing right there. What more proof do you need?" Judge Judy's face remained unchanged. "What more proof indeed, Mrs. Williams?" She turned to the evidence binder. "You mentioned you have text messages from Danny that you claim were threatening." Karen brightened. "Yes." She pulled out printed screenshots. "After the incident, he sent me several messages from an unknown number, clearly trying to intimidate me into dropping the case. They said things like, 'You better watch yourself,' and 'you don't know who you're messing with,' obviously. Threatening language from someone who knows. They're guilty." Judge Judy examined the printouts with the precision of a jeweler inspecting a questionable stone. "These messages came from an unknown number." "Yes," Karen confirmed. "He was clearly trying to hide his identity, but the timing makes it obvious they came from him. They started the day after I filed my complaint with the store manager." Judge Judy set the papers down and looked directly at Karen, her gaze sharp enough to make the woman shift in her seat. "Mrs. Williams, I have to say, your evidence is quite thorough. Almost too thorough for someone who claims this was a random act of vandalism." Karen smiled, misinterpreting the statement as praise. "Well, Your Honor, I believe in being prepared. When someone wrongs you, you document everything. That's just common sense." Judge Judy nodded. "Indeed, documentation is very important. It's why I did some documenting of my own." Karen's smile faltered, confusion flickering across her face. She had no idea she was moments from being cornered. Judge Judy turned her attention to Danny, who had been sitting silently, pale with stress. "Mr. Martinez, let's hear your side of this story." Danny stood slowly, his legs trembling as he faced the judge. Unlike Karen's practiced theatrics, his fear was raw and genuine. He cleared his throat twice before he could speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your Honor, I didn't do this. I swear on my father's memory, I didn't do anything to her car. I wasn't even at work that day." Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, her expression softening slightly in a way regular viewers recognized as a sign she believed she was hearing the truth. "Go on, Mr. Martinez. Tell me about October 15th. Danny took a deep breath, steadying himself. October 15th was a Saturday. I remember because I had requested that day off 3 weeks in advance. My school's robotics team had a regional competition in Riverside, about 40 miles from here. We left at 7 in the morning and didn't get back until almost 8 that night. I have the competition schedule here." He held up a printed page with trembling hands. Judge Judy took the paper and examined it carefully while Danny continued. "We competed in 3 rounds that day. My team built an autonomous robot for the engineering challenge. We placed second overall, which qualified us for the state championship." Karen couldn't hold herself back. She let out an exaggerated scoff and rolled her eyes so dramatically that several audience members gasped. "Your Honor, please. Of course he's going to claim he was somewhere else. He's had weeks to come up with this alibi. He probably has his little friends ready to lie for him, too. These kids all cover for each other." Judge Judy's head snapped toward Karen with the speed of a cobra. "Mrs. Williams, you will not speak unless I address you directly. Do you understand?" The sharpness in her voice made Karen recoil. "Yes, Your Honor," she muttered, her confidence beginning to crack. Judge Judy turned back to Danny with a noticeably gentler tone. "Continue, Mr. Martinez. Do you have any proof you attended this competition?" Danny's shoulders sagged. "That's the problem, Your Honor. I don't have official proof that I was there. No photos or anything, because we're not allowed to have our phones during competition hours. They make us lock them up so we can't get help or look things up. My coach and teammates can verify I was there, but I know that's just people's word." He looked down at his hands. "Mrs. Williams has all these professional documents and photos, and all I have is the truth. I know that probably isn't enough." The raw honesty in Danny's voice was unmistakable. Judge Judy studied him for a long moment before asking her next question. "Tell me about your work schedule at Riverside Grocery. How long have you worked there?" Danny looked up, relieved to have a question he could answer clearly. "I've been there for 14 months, Your Honor. Ever since my dad passed away. My mom works as a nurse, but her salary alone wasn't enough to cover everything, especially with my little sister needing braces and me saving for college. I work 3 days a week after school and most Saturdays well. I did work most Saturdays until I got suspended because of this case." His voice cracked slightly. "I loved that job. My manager, Mr. Peterson, was really understanding about my school schedule and let me have time off for robotics competitions." Judge Judy made notes as Danny spoke, then asked a question that seemed almost casual. "And did you ever have any interaction with Mrs. Williams before this accusation?" Danny nodded reluctantly. "Yes, ma'am. About 2 weeks before she said this happened, she came through my checkout line. She had a lot of groceries, and she asked me to help carry them to her car. I explained very politely that I couldn't leave my register because there were other customers waiting, and I'm not supposed to leave my station without a manager's approval. It's literally against store policy." Judge Judy's interest sharpened immediately. And how did Mrs. Williams react to that? Danny's face showed how painful the memory was. She got really angry. She started saying things about how young people have no work ethic and no respect for their elders. She demanded to speak to my manager. When Mr. Peterson came over, she complained that I had refused to help a customer. My manager explained the policy to her that baggers help with carryout, not cashiers, and that I had followed procedure. She left angry, and I honestly thought that was the end of it. He glanced at Karen, who was glaring at him with open hostility. I never imagined she would make up something like this to get back at me. Karen shot out of her seat. That is a complete lie, Your Honor. He's twisting everything. I was perfectly polite, and he was deliberately rude to me. Judge Judy's gavel came down with a crack that made everyone jump. Mrs. Williams, sit down and be quiet, or I will hold you in contempt. This is your final warning. Karen dropped back into her seat. Her face flushed with anger and something that looked very much like fear. Judge Judy turned back to Danny. Caught, but her demeanor had changed. The gentleness was gone, replaced by the calculating look of someone preparing to expose a lie. Mr. Martinez, you mentioned you requested October 15th off 3 weeks in advance. Do you have any documentation of that request? Danny nodded and pulled out a slightly crumpled paper. I kept the approval form Mr. Peterson gave me. It's dated September 23rd. It shows I requested October 15th off for the robotics competition, and he approved it. Judge Judy examined the paper closely, then did something that made Karen visibly tense. She smiled. Not a friendly smile, but the kind of smile a chess master wears just before announcing checkmate. Mrs. Williams, you testified under oath that you saw Danny in his store uniform at 3 p.m. on October 15th, correct? Karen's voice had lost its earlier strength. Yes, that's correct. And you're absolutely certain it was October 15th, not another day? Completely certain, Karen insisted, though her hands now gripped the table. I already told you I may have initially written the 14th, but I meant the 15th. I'm positive about the date because of my dinner party that evening. Judge Judy opened a folder that had been sitting in front of her since the beginning of the hearing. A folder Karen had been eyeing nervously, but hadn't been able to identify. Mrs. Williams, I have something very interesting to show you. I have the official employee schedule from Riverside Grocery for the entire month of October. She held up a document with the store's letterhead clearly visible. According to this official record, which was provided directly by the store manager and verified with their corporate human resources department, Danny Martinez was not scheduled to work on October 15th. In fact, he was marked as having an approved absence for a school event. He was not at the store that day at all. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Karen's face drained of color instantly. That can't be right, she stammered. I saw him. I know I saw him in his uniform. Judge Judy's voice was cold and sharp. So you're saying the official employment records of a major grocery chain are wrong, but your memory is infallible. Karen's mouth opened and closed helplessly. Maybe it was a different day then. Maybe I got confused about when the damage actually happened. Judge Judy leaned forward. Mrs. Williams, you just testified under oath multiple times that you were absolutely certain about the date. Now suddenly you're confused. Which is it? The trap had been sprung, and Karen was caught. Her carefully constructed facade was collapsing like a sandcastle in a storm. She gripped the edge of the defendant's table so tightly her knuckles turned white, searching desperately for an explanation that might rescue her from the hole she had dug. Your Honor, I must have been mistaken about the specific date, but that doesn't change the fact that he damaged my car. Maybe it was the 14th or the 16th. The damage is still real. The repair bills are still real. He still did this. Judge Judy's expression was unmoving. Mrs. Williams, you came into my courtroom with professional legal representation, extensive documentation, and sworn testimony about specific dates and times. Now you're telling me you can't remember when this allegedly happened? That's remarkably convenient, given that your entire case depends on seeing Danny at a specific time and place. Karen's lawyer placed a hand on her arm, silently urging her to stop. But desperation had overridden her judgment. I know what I saw, Your Honor. Maybe I got the date mixed up in my paperwork, but I definitely saw him near my car. And the damage definitely happened around that time. He had the motive. He was angry at me, and teenagers like him don't respect other people's property. Judge Judy raised her hand, silencing Karen's frantic rambling. Mrs. Williams, let me ask you something else. You stated there were no witnesses to this incident because you had parked far from the store entrance in an empty section of the parking lot, correct? Yes, Karen answered, her voice weary. Sensing another trap but unable to pinpoint it, Judge Judy's smile widened, sharp and predatory. That's fascinating, because Riverside Grocery has security cameras covering their entire parking lot. Every single section, including the areas far from the entrance. In fact, they upgraded their security system just 6 months ago, specifically to prevent theft and vandalism. The color drained completely from Karen's face. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Her lawyer closed his eyes and slowly shook his head, recognizing that his client had just been caught in a lie that obliterated her case. Judge Judy pressed on with surgical precision. When I contacted the grocery store as part of my investigation, they were very cooperative. They provided me with footage from October 14th, 15th, and 16th, just to be thorough. Since you seemed uncertain about dates, she paused. Would you like to know what that footage shows, Mrs. Williams? Karen's voice came out as a strained whisper. I didn't know there were cameras in that section. Judge Judy pounced. So you did know there were cameras, just not in that specific section. That's very interesting, Mrs. Williams. Because someone who genuinely witnessed vandalism would typically want security footage to support their claim. Yet you never mentioned cameras. You claimed there were no witnesses. You built your entire case around the assumption that this would be your word against. Danny's, why would someone seeking justice avoid mentioning potential video evidence? Karen tried desperately to recover. I just forgot about the cameras. I was upset about my car and wasn't thinking clearly about security footage. It was an oversight. Judge Judy let out a short, humorless laugh. An oversight. You remembered to document repair estimates, take professional photographs, hire a lawyer, create a detailed timeline, and produce text messages, but you forgot about security cameras. Mrs. Williams, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I can smell deception from a mile away. You didn't forget about cameras. You hoped there weren't any in that section because you knew what they would show. The courtroom fell completely silent. Even the camera operators appeared to be holding their breath. Judge Judy reached for her laptop and turned it. So the courtroom monitor displayed the screen. I'm going to show you something now, Mrs. Williams, and I want you to watch very carefully. The footage began to play. It showed the Riverside Grocery parking lot. Date and timestamped October 15th at 2:47 p.m. Karen's Tesla was clearly visible, parked far from the entrance exactly as she had described. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a figure appeared on screen. Not Danny Martinez. Not a teenage grocery store employee in a green uniform. Instead, the cameras captured a tall teenage boy in a red hoodie and jeans walking up to the Tesla. He looked around furtively, then pulled out a key and deliberately dragged it along the passenger side, creating the exact scratches Karen had photographed and submitted as evidence. When he turned, the camera caught part of his face. He looked strikingly similar to Karen Williams. Judge Judy paused the video at a clear frame showing the vandal's face. Mrs. Williams, would you like to tell me who this young man is? The courtroom erupted in shocked gasps and murmurs. Karen sat frozen, staring at the screen with an expression of utter horror. Tears streamed down her face, not tears of remorse, but of humiliation and fear. That's my son, she whispered. That's Tyler. He took my car without permission that day. When I found the damage, I was furious. The repairs were so expensive, and my insurance deductible is $3,000. I couldn't afford it. Judge Judy's voice sliced through the room like a blade. So let me make sure I understand this correctly. Your son damaged your car. You discovered the damage and panicked about the cost. And your solution was to frame an innocent 16-year-old boy, potentially destroying his future, his college fund, his job, and his reputation, because you didn't want to pay for your own son's vandalism. Karen was sobbing openly now, her makeup streaking down her face. I saw an opportunity. Danny had been rude to me. I remembered he worked at that store. I thought if I could blame him, my insurance would cover it under vandalism, and he would learn a lesson about respecting his elders. I didn't think it would go this far. I thought he would just admit it, and his family would pay. Judge Judy's fury was controlled, but absolutely devastating. You didn't think it would go this far? Mrs. Williams, you hired a lawyer. You prepared extensive false documentation. You committed perjury in this courtroom. You fabricated evidence, including fake threatening text messages. She held up the printouts Karen had submitted earlier. Let me guess, you created these texts yourself from a burner phone app to make. Danny looked dangerous and vengeful. Karen nodded miserably. Unable to speak, Judge Judy continued her systematic dismantling. You targeted this boy specifically because you were angry that he followed his workplace rules instead of breaking them to serve you. You saw a hard-working kid from a struggling family and decided he was expendable. You were willing to destroy everything he had worked for, everything his late father had saved for him, just to avoid paying a repair bill and punish someone for having the audacity to tell you no. Her voice rose with righteous anger. Do you have any idea what you've done to this child? He's been suspended from his job. His college applications have been delayed. His family has been terrified of losing everything. His mother has been working double shifts to prepare for a judgment against them. And you did all of this deliberately, with calculation and malice, to cover for your own failure as a parent. Karen's sobs grew louder, but Judge Judy offered no sympathy. And another thing, Mrs. Williams, you said your son took the car without permission. The footage shows him with the keys, walking calmly, clearly having driven the vehicle himself. Your son didn't steal your car. You let him use it, and when he damaged it, you both panicked. Then you conspired together to frame an innocent teenager. Karen looked up with red, swollen eyes. He was scared about what I would do when I found out. He begged me not to tell his father. I just wanted to protect my son. Judge Judy's response was icy. So you decided to destroy someone else's son instead. That's not protection, Mrs. Williams. That's evil. Danny sat in his chair with tears of relief streaming down his face as the truth finally emerged. His hands still shook, but now from overwhelming vindication rather than fear. Judge Judy looked at him with genuine compassion. Mr. Martinez, I apologize that you had to endure this ordeal. This woman's actions were reprehensible, and you deserve justice. Judge Judy straightened in her chair, her expression shifting from investigator to the ultimate arbiter of justice. The entire courtroom leaned forward, sensing that what came next would be remembered for years. Mrs. Williams, Judge Judy began, her tone cutting and unyielding. In 25 years of presiding over cases, I have encountered liars, cheats, and frauds of every variety. But what you have done here today ranks among the most despicable acts I have ever witnessed in my courtroom. You didn't just lie. You didn't just commit perjury. You engaged in a calculated, premeditated campaign to destroy an innocent child's life, to save yourself money and exact petty revenge. Her voice hardened even further. You fabricated evidence. You created false text messages to make this boy appear threatening. You coached yourself on dates and times to make your story seem credible. You hired a lawyer and spent thousands of dollars not to seek justice, but to perpetrate injustice. You looked me in the eye and lied under oath repeatedly, betting that a working-class teenager wouldn't have the resources to fight back against your wealth and preparation. Karen had collapsed forward onto the defendant's table. her body shaking with sobs loud enough for the entire courtroom to hear. Her expensive lawyer sat stiffly beside her, looking as though he wished he could sink through the floor, fully aware his reputation had just taken a catastrophic hit. By association with her fraud, Judge Judy was far from finished. What makes your actions even more unconscionable is your motive. This wasn't about justice. This wasn't even really about money, though you were certainly willing to steal this boy's college fund. This was about power and revenge. Danny Martinez committed the unforgivable sin of following his workplace rules instead of breaking them to serve you. He had the audacity to treat you like any other customer instead of royalty. So you decided to teach him a lesson about what happens when people don't bow to your demands. You decided to show him and every other young person in your community that crossing Karen Williams comes with life-destroying consequences. Judge Judy's eyes blazed with righteous fury, but you picked the wrong teenager. And you definitely picked the wrong courtroom. Danny Martinez is exactly the kind of young person we should be celebrating and protecting, not destroying. He lost his father and stepped up to help support his family. He maintains honor roll grades while working part-time. He participates in academic competitions that will benefit his future. He followed workplace rules even when pressured to break them. He is everything right about the next generation. And you tried to crush him because he wouldn't carry your groceries. The judge turned to Danny, her expression softening. Mr. Martinez, this case is dismissed with prejudice. Meaning Mrs. Williams can never bring these false charges against you again. You owe her nothing, not one penny. Danny's eyes widened in shock. Judge Judy continued. Furthermore, I am awarding you $8,500 in compensatory damages for the emotional distress, job suspension, and harm to your reputation that her false accusations caused. It was the exact amount Karen had tried to take from him, now returned with the full force of judicial authority. But Judge Judy was not done. Additionally, Mrs. Williams will pay you an extra $5,000 in punitive damages because her conduct was so egregious. It warrants punishment beyond mere compensation. She will also pay all court costs and filing fees. The total judgment against Karen Williams is $14,300, payable immediately. Karen's head jerked up, her face a mask of horror. Your Honor, I can't afford that. I don't have that kind of money. Judge Judy's smile was colder than ice. You had $3,000 for a lawyer to help you commit fraud. You have an $85,000 Tesla. You'll find the money, Mrs. Williams, or I'll ensure this judgment follows you until you do. Wage garnishment. Liens on property, whatever it takes. But the financial consequences were only the beginning. I am also forwarding all evidence from this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. You committed perjury, which is a felony. You created false evidence, which is a crime. You filed a fraudulent insurance claim, which is insurance fraud. You attempted to extort money through false accusations, which is attempted theft by deception. Mrs. Williams, you came into my courtroom thinking you were clever enough to get away with destroying a child's life. Instead, you may very well end up facing criminal prosecution that could result in jail time. Karen's sobs became hysterical. She had entered the courtroom expecting money and revenge. Now she faced financial ruin and possible imprisonment. Judge Judy turned back to Danny one final time. Mr. Martinez, I am also going to do something I rarely do. I am personally writing a letter to Riverside Grocery, recommending your immediate reinstatement with back pay for all shifts you miss during this suspension. I am writing letters to every college on your application, list explaining exactly what happened here and vouching for your character. And I am personally contributing an additional $5,000 to your college fund because students like you deserve every opportunity to succeed. Courtroom erupted in thunderous applause. Danny broke down completely, covering his face with his hands as the weight of months of fear and stress dissolved into tears of overwhelming relief and gratitude. The impact of the case didn't stop at the courtroom doors. Within hours of the episode airing, the footage had been shared millions of times across every social media platform. The hashtag Justice for Danny trended worldwide for 3 consecutive days as people shared their own experiences with false accusations and celebrated seeing accountability delivered so decisively. Karen Williams became infamous overnight. Her face appeared across internet forums and news articles as the embodiment of entitlement taken to criminal extremes. Her local community recognized her immediately, and the social consequences were swift and unforgiving. Neighbors who had feared her for years finally felt empowered to speak out about her long-standing pattern of harassment and baseless complaints. The Homeowners Association launched an investigation into her previous accusations against teenagers, uncovering that at least 4 other families had been targeted without justification. Her insurance company canceled her policy after learning about the attempted fraud, and other insurers refused to cover her once they became aware of the case. Karen was forced to sell her Tesla to pay the judgment against Danny, and her husband filed for divorce 3 months later, citing her dishonesty and the humiliation she had brought upon their family. Her son, Tyler, the actual vandal, faced consequences as well, but ones intended to teach rather than ruin. He was required to get a part-time job and repay his mother for the repairs through his own work. Learning the lesson about accountability that she had tried so hard to avoid, Danny Martinez's life changed in ways he never dreamed possible. The money from the judgment, along with Judge Judy's personal contribution, fully funded his first 2 years of college. His story inspired a local business owner to establish a scholarship fund for students who had overcome adversity, with Danny awarded an additional $10,000. As the first recipient, Riverside Grocery not only reinstated him with back pay, but also promoted him to a supervisory position with higher wages and a schedule that accommodated his college plans. Universities that had put his applications on hold during the case began actively recruiting him, impressed by his integrity under pressure. He received acceptance letters from 6 schools and ultimately chose to study engineering at a prestigious state university. Most importantly, Danny's mother no longer had to work double shifts. Her son's vindication and the financial breathing room it created allowed their family to finally begin healing after years of hardship. This case became more than just viral entertainment. It evolved into a teaching example used in law schools to demonstrate the consequences of perjury and false accusations. Family counselors used it to highlight the difference between protecting a child and enabling harmful behavior. Ethics courses examined it as a cautionary tale about what happens when personal vengeance replaces moral responsibility. Judge Judy's handling of the case was praised by legal experts as a masterclass in investigative justice, showing why thorough preparation and attention to detail matter in every case. No matter how small it appears, if this story of justice triumphing over entitled deception restored your faith in accountability, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think should happen to people who make false accusations? Should Karen have faced even harsher consequences? Do you think her son truly learned his lesson? I love reading your perspectives on these remarkable cases. And if you want to see more stories of Judge Judy absolutely dismantling people who believe they're above the law, hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Coming up next is an even more shocking case involving an entitled landlord who tried to evict a disabled veteran, and Judge Judy uncovered fraud so extensive it landed him in federal prison. You will not believe what she discovered. Entitled people continue to think they can manipulate the system and exploit the vulnerable. But Judge Judy proves again and again that truth and justice will always triumph over lies and privilege. This case is a reminder that one person standing up for what's right can change everything. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against injustice is simply refusing to be silent. Danny Martinez walked into that courtroom terrified and alone, facing an opponent with every advantage money could buy. He walked out vindicated, compensated. And on his way to the bright future his father had always hoped for him. Karen Williams walked in confident that her wealth and deception would crush a teenager too poor to defend himself. She walked out facing financial ruin, criminal investigation, and permanent notoriety as one of the most despicable liars ever caught on camera. That's what real justice looks like.